while America is and can be very racist,
Yeah.
it's probably still the least racist country in the world.
And then H-1B got brought into question.
Very, very hot button topic. Go home. Shit got gnarly.
When you move here, all you want to do is figure out your life, figure out a way to stay here, start a company.
My mom's like, Beta, why don't you work at Facebook? Like, they're hiring people. But I had this dream. I wanted to start a company.
Until you get rid of all of the baggage of temporary immigration, you are not able to do that.
The O1 visa is how I came to America. It's how a lot of founders have come to America.
American dream is called American dream for a reason.
We grew up in Oman in the Middle East, but you're never ever treated as a local.
And how did you deal with that once you moved to the States?
I think the US is probably my closest cultural affiliation, but it's definitely a confusing one.
What do you think US's approach should be towards skilled immigration?
Big reason America is attractive is the smartest and the brightest come here. But if that ever changes,
You moved to the US from Oman. I want to get to that specific part of the story and talk a lot about specifics of visas, immigration, all that's going on in the news today. But before we do that, what was it like dealing all things identity and who you are as a person, as an Indian guy in Oman, and how did you deal with that once you moved to the States?
yeah, absolutely. Is there anyone here who identifies as third culture? All right, I'll explain what
what's a third culture?
Third culture, like, so me, I'm from India. I never lived there. I grew up in Oman in the Middle East, and then I moved to America. It's when you identify with three cultures and potentially identify with zero cultures, right? A little slice of everything. So that was my life. We were Indian immigrants, but had never lived in India. So always, so, every time we went to India, we were visitors there. We grew up in Oman in the Middle East, which is a beautiful Gulf country, has a lot of oil, like very friendly people, but you're never ever treated as a local, right? My parents worked there 40 years. They're still expats. They have no sort of citizenship. And then I moved to America for college at the age of 17. And I think given how long I've been here now, which is, closing in on over 15 years, I think the US is probably my closest cultural affiliation, but it's definitely a confusing one.
Talk to me about moving to the States and when you moved to the States, because you came here for college. And obviously it's a cliched question to ask, like, what's it like moving to the US by yourself? But I'm still going to ask it. Talk to me about what was it like just going to school here, and specifically as a guy who was already not being able to identify as either cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, I was very excited when I was coming to America. This is just kind of silly, but all I'd known about what life in the US would be like was the movies. So I watched American Pie, and I was like,
Oh, yeah, it's a great movie, yes.
college in the US is going to be wild. So yeah, so much fun. But I went to Berkeley, which is a very...
Yeah, that's not the school of American Pie. No, it's full of nerds, yeah.
But at the time, I was very excited. It's only after I lived here for maybe 6 months that I was like, fuck, I actually know no one here. Like, I had no family, like pretty much had to, again, it's college, which is a very friendly environment, but you are truly sort of on your own.
Yeah.
And I'm very happy I did it at the age of 17, since I think when you're 17, you're very malleable in a way that I have friends who moved here after graduating college. There's a big difference. There's a big difference in moving here 17 versus even 21 or 22, because you're so much more impressionable and change so much more. So I'm very grateful. I don't think I would have had the life, the opportunities. I went to an Indian school back in Oman, and I was not made for the Indian school system. For people who don't know the Indian school system, so it's a lot of like memorization. It's a lot of like math and science and remembering things. And, there was no incentive to like kind of be smart about the system. When you move to America, and especially in American college, you could do a lot of stuff by just being smart about the system, by figuring out what classes to take, the game behind the game, if you will, which actually lends itself well to starting a business. So when I moved here, I definitely identified with that part of American culture more so than a very traditional Indian school.
When you move here, all you want to do is figure out your life, figure out a way to stay here, start a company or work in a company, whatever that is. By definition, the irony of being here is that you take a big risk to come here, but then you become risk averse because you don't want to lose what you got. However, you started working on a bunch of things, and some of those worked out great, even before Teachable. Talk to me more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I definitely got a little bit lucky. I moved at the age of 17. At the age of 18, freshman summer, I interned at Amazon. I was down this like computer engineering path, like good Indian kid, all of that. In retrospect, 18 was too early to have an internship, and within a few weeks, I really didn't like it, and I was homesick, and I realized my team didn't really care about me. We were working on a small part of a very large app, but that coincided with the launch of the Facebook platform. So back then, Facebook opened their platform. You could build silly games and quizzes and applications. And over the course of that summer, I started doing that. And by the end of the summer, I made like $20 a day or something. But that was the most significant $20 a day ever because it showed me I can do things on the internet
Yeah.
and make money.
This is getting like technical about all things Facebook. Talk to me about that heyday of being able to just ship stuff on Facebook, and it's like nothing else today.
I mean, it was remarkable. I think most people in this room are too young for this time, but I would say between 2008, 2009, Facebook opened up their platform. You could create applications that went from zero to millions of people within days. I still remember when I was graduating college, this is skipping forward a little. I had an application company and we had more daily active users at the time than the New York Times, LinkedIn, like Yelp, like all these big websites, just to the power of Facebook's distribution. So crazy time.
What did you learn designing apps and designing games in Facebook? Because there's a lot to learn regarding all things human behavior and gamifying it. What did you learn about that?
Yeah, so it's fascinating because it's a crash course on like how humans work. Like we would build these Facebook quizzes that very embarrassing. You'd answer a bunch of questions, and the quiz would tell you which friend's character you are, or how bad a kisser you are, or whatever, just based on responses there. What we found is vanity was such a driver. Oh, yeah, like people didn't even care to know what their thing was. They took the quiz over and over till they got the result they wanted.
Yeah.
And then they posted like, "Oh, obviously it's a Monica, right? Totally." Um, the other thing, there's also something called the Barnum effect, which is you could convincingly, and this has made me rethink certain parts of astrology, but you could convincingly sort of describe someone in a way that feels very unique and special to them,
Hmm.
but it applies to everyone. Like we had a quiz called "What color is your aura?" And the answer would be like, "Oh, the color of your aura is black. You're mysterious. People think they know you, but they don't really know who you are." Or call it red. You're a passionate person, even though
Yeah.
other people don't see that. So this was fascinating. It was fun and games at the time. I was, 19 years old, 20 years old doing this. And we built a pretty cool business literally from my dorm room. But that sort of radicalized me when I'm like, shit, I can actually do this
Money, yeah.
to make money. What I didn't even realize at the time is I may have been violating my F1 student
Yeah,
visa. That's that I didn't even know.
yeah, let's get into that. Hopefully there's no feds here. But talk to me about that part where you realize that, oh, you're making actual cash here, and not only that, now you have to figure out all things immigration and doing it legally and potentially not going to tax jail.
So I didn't even realize that. This sounds dumb, but I didn't even think about that until I want to say I was graduating college. I had not paid any taxes at the time. I had like wasn't sure what to do. Talk to an immigration lawyer, talk to a tax lawyer. First thing they did is like they're like pay your taxes, like immigration and tax are like unconnected. I grew up in Oman. There's no tax in Oman. This whole thing was zero tax. So much oil money. There's like no tax.
Tell me about, so as a, because you were in J1 back then.
F1 visa.
One. For those who don't know what's a
F1 is the standard visa undergraduates come to America with. Came here at 17. Right after I graduated, what I did is there's something called an OPT, which is like practical training. But there's a little bit of a loophole in that there's no rule that you can't sponsor your own training.
Yeah.
So I created a business with a friend of mine and I sponsored my own OPT. Um, Figured the money I'd made before was still in a bit of a gray area, but when it was done, and it was fine.
At that point, what was your big picture goal vis-a-vis like staying in America, starting a business? What you wanted to do with your life?
I at that point I knew I wanted to build a business. I was going to school at Berkeley. You were right by San Francisco. I talked to like Naval Ravikant and Mark Andreessen and all these highly inspirational people, and they're like, yeah, build a startup. Like that was my goal and dream and hope, and all I wanted to do at that point.
The reason I want to double click on that because many people in this room right now are like have been in that limbo area where like you're either in something which is super structured, which can be having a corporate job or going to school, and that you living here and making money here or going to school here is tied to all things staying connected to that institution which sponsors your visa. What was your mindset regarding the fact that you were tethered to Berkeley, and how did you want to separate away and build your own thing while also dealing with immigration?
So I thought about it in like time periods. So graduated 12-month OPT, fine. 12-month OPT runs out. And then after graduation, there were about 2.5 years where nothing I tried really worked. Like I was tried maybe 10, 15 business ideas, got a little bit of traction, nothing crazy. I had savings from all the money I made in college. So I wasn't that concerned about cash, but like not forever. And immigration was a concern. But 12-month OPT, then you could get an OPT extension if you were in a technical field. So I got the OPT extension. Then that starts running out. And now I start freaking out a little.
Yeah.
My mom's like, Beta, why don't you work at Facebook? Like they're hiring people. But I had this dream. I wanted to start a company. So what I did is I Googled the cheapest community college I could find. And I ended up enrolling at Foothill College in Los Altos, where it was $2,000 a semester for classes I wasn't actually going to, just to be able to stay on while I figured this out. But as soon as I had to like occasionally drive 90 minutes for a songwriting class I didn't care about, that gave me the motivation to take this integration stuff seriously. I hired a really good lawyer, temporarily worked at a friend's company, got an O1, then got an EB1 green card. And only from that point on was I able to actually start my actual life and career and start Teachable.
So to hone in on that, you knew that you wanted to start Teachable. However, you are fully aware of the fact that until you get rid of all of the baggage of all things temporary immigration, you were not able to do that.
It wasn't a solitary factor. I also had a few years of trying ideas and nothing worked. The in-between period was really hard, where I had to pretend to go to community college and get midterms while trying to build a business. So the interim period, I couldn't really do anything.
Yeah.
But once I cleared that, I moved to New York City and started Teachable.
Okay, let's talk about that journey a little bit, which is a little bit different from the immigration journey. Why did you choose New York City? First question. Yeah.
I was 23 years old and I came here for a weekend. Yeah. And I used to live in San Francisco before then. So uh, I went out a little and I'm like, why am I spending my 20s in San Francisco? Not the city for me. And I wish I had a better reason. I wish I could say I was intentional because the New York tech scene. No, as a 23-year-old, there's no city in the world like New York.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I want to ask you that is because, like, the SF scene is so dramatically different than all things in New York City, and a lot of people have to actively think where they want to create their home base. And for, let's call them fresh off the boat people, how would you advise them thinking about where in America do you want to build not just your life, but your business in general? How would you advise them thinking about that process?
Look, I think if you're in a major city, go where you feel the best, where you feel happiest, where you feel most connected, where you have community. Since at the end of the day, I think that's going to impact your outcomes in life more than being in the single most optimal place for whatever. So for some people, they love the energy and culture of San Francisco. For some people, it's New York. For some, it's LA. So I think it's a very personal decision, and I wouldn't be overly prescriptive. I would go try a bunch of cities and see what connects with you.
Let's talk about Teachable a little bit because I want to hone in on that because I work in the creator economy and you found Teachable back when creator economy wasn't even a term and it was developing post blogging era. If you guys remember, people used to just like write online and that used to be like basically their Twitter feed or their Instagram feed, and that evolved to what it is today. How did you think about the fact that there was something monetizable there, and how did you actually turn that into business?
Yeah, it's funny when people build a startup, they create the narrative later on in a way that sounds good. But for us, we it was super unintentional. Like it was always one small idea that became a little bit bigger. It started with we saw courses on YouTube. We saw people creating videos on YouTube, and there's Udemy, a course hosting platform. Like, oh, let's take these YouTube videos, put it on Udemy, make a little bit of money. And then we're like, the YouTube guys are kind of bad. Let's try our own videos on Udemy, make a little bit of money. Then we're like, Udemy takes too much. What if we put it on our own website? And every step, it's just like solving a problem for one person, two people. You do that, you go to something else, you go to something else. We got very fortunate that the creator economy happened. It was unintentional. Our first vision was education, but like on your own website. Then the creator economy happened, Instagram, YouTube, everything blew up, and we were in the right place, the right time.
At that period of your life, were you foreseeing being able to exit and make it this big and make it life changing for you, or were you just like seeking to basically build a
I
business?
mean, look, the dream, like if anyone tells you like they don't want to make a lot of money building a startup, they're lying. Yeah. But at no point was it sort of my like singular motivation. And I never built the company like we never even tried to sell the company, and a good offer came and we ended up selling it, but there was never any intentionality that we're going to build it to exit.
From that point, let's fast forward to the exit. Um, you said something pretty profound, which was like making all of that money kind of made you who you already were. Talk to me about that realization, and especially as an immigrant.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that, like, when it came to what did I spend money on, those very, very like little big life things. I was in a tiny, tiny apartment before I bought a nice place. I did
Yeah.
that. Uh, but the biggest thing that really, like, even I bought a car right after I sold my company for a lot of money, but I still bought a secondhand car. I can't like change certain prices.
What car was it? Was it a Beamer?
Yeah,
Yeah, it sounds like a Beamer. Yeah. Okay.
but the biggest unlock it was for me was like the freedom. A very specific example. As an immigrant, I've always had this guilt about like abandoning my family in a way that, they worked really hard, like they saved up so much money so that I could go to America and build a life for myself. But in return, they get to grow old by themselves.
Yeah.
Like this like distance between us. So, but after I sold my business, I was able to prioritize spending so much more time with them. We now do like maybe 4 big family vacations a year, which is like a huge amount of time.
Yeah.
So those have been the things that like massively improve my quality of life. It's not the like quantity of money, but it's the freedom
Yeah.
that it's brought.
The parent thing resonates me. I'm an only child, so um, what did your parents think? Because I'm guessing that that was a life-changing amount even for them in the larger Nagpal family, let's say. Um,
No one in our entire family like legacy can go back.
so like the reason I'm asking is like a lot of people when they make life-changing money, they change who they are as people, and especially when you're an immigrant, because there are so many versions of you can become. How did you decide to, let's say, like staying true to who you were as a person?
I mean, it's just there's no sort of other way of being. I think a lot of it is how you are raised and,
Yeah.
and all of that. And again, I feel very fortunate. I think my parents have just been the best parents I could ever ask for, and that's kind of reflected in the things since. But yeah, like as I said, now we'll spend a little bit more on going on nicer trips and things like that, and that in turn is so rewarding. I was actually thinking, if you came from a lot of money and then still made a lot of money, in some ways it's like less fun because if you do nice things for your parents, you're just paying for the shit they always
Already
did.
there. Yeah. Yeah.
But for me, I'm able to like, take my parents to like a nicer place than they've ever been before. And it's like so cool to experience that together.
Let's change gears to immigration. Even though American Pie is a pretty awesome reason to move to the States, tell me more about like what is the grown-up version of how you think about why America still should be the magnet for all things skill talent.
Yeah. So like growing up, it was, even though we went to an Indian school, my dad always told me he wanted me to come to the US. I mean, that was always his dream, his vision. It was never even something for me to think about. But now in retrospect, I mean, it makes a lot of sense because as much as I think the rest of the world is an incredible place to live, to travel, to vacation, there's no better place to build a life for yourself, to build a business. America to me is the best country to come here and, build something, take your work seriously. And as long as we kind of protected it, and by protected, I mean the big reason America is attractive is it brings everyone else, right? Like think about New York City. It's a melting pot of people from all over. The smartest and the brightest come here. But if that ever changes, that does get a little bit scary. But other than that, it's a magnet for smart people. Entrepreneurs, risk taking is looked at positively here. When I was 17, 18, 19 years old in college trying to build a business, people didn't laugh at me.
Yeah.
In a lot of the world, people laugh at you. They're like, who is this? Who does this 18-year-old think they are? Like,
Yeah.
where's your dad?
The reason that's super important because like when I was talking to a friend back in UK, and even though it's getting better now, the way he said it was like if you tell someone in the UK that hey, I want to go to the moon, they will laugh at you. If you tell someone here, hey, I want to go to the moon, they'll be like, hey, can I invest in the rocket or something like that? So that spirit is people. It's kind of cliched, but like American Dream is called American Dream for a reason, and we will get back to all of the discourse what happened during December vis-a-vis the H-1B drama. But before I get to that, you also really like to talk about O-1 visa and how you can help people with O-1 visa. Two things. Why would you like to prioritize all things O-1? And second, really, why did you choose to basically write letter of recommendations for people?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the O1 visa is how I came to America. It's how a lot of founders come to America. And I also think it's obviously not a hack because, again, the O1 visa, it's the extraordinary ability visa. It typically has like very stringent criteria. But I do think there's a little bit of alpha there because you can sponsor your own O1 visa. There's no limit on how many per year. You can have premium processing. And if you actually look at the data, 95% of O1 applications were accepted last year. So what I tell myself is if I can convince more people to apply, like there's a chance you may get rejected, but more people should be applying. Like, the fact that it's 95% means too many people are scared to take a shot.
Yeah.
And if I can get more people to take a shot and apply,
Yeah.
more people will move here.
Let's stay on like why people don't even convince themselves that they're good enough for
It's
O1.
terrifying,
Yeah.
right? Like person of extraordinary ability, or you like will you read that and you're like, I'm not extraordinary. Why the fuck would I apply for this?
Yeah, I mean, something which I think you said, which is like O1 visa means that you are best in your world, but you have to define what your world is.
Correct. So the reason a good lawyer, maybe his company or whoever you work with, as they craft a good application, a big part of it is defining what you want to call yourself extraordinary in. And there's smart ways of going about it, right? Again, you can make what you're extraordinary in very, very narrow and go ahead and sort of get those qualifications.
The only reason I got plugged into O1 was because I did not get my H1B. Like, I did not even know that that was a thing. I happened to have good lawyers. They were like, I was working in DC journalism back then, and I'm not a tech founder like any all. So, like, I don't have, like, I didn't raise money or anything like that. The only reason I got it because I got people from CNN, Fox, MSNBC, people who worked in legacy media to write letter of recommendations.
Yep.
And let's stay on like the mindset of all things USCIS because a lot of the times we play too much insider baseball and we forget who are the people, who's the boomer in Illinois who's like going over my application and how can I cater to him?
Yeah. Yeah. The other side of what makes an O1 hard is you typically need a bunch of letters of recommendation from pretty well known people. I think on my application had 10 letters of recommendation. So one of the other things I did, and a lot of people I know have done, is we've raised our hand and said, if anyone needs a letter of recommendation, I'll sign it for you. And I've probably signed, I want to say well over 100 letters, and a lot of them have made it to America. And you'll find a lot of smart people. If you ask them, they'll say yes. Like if you ask someone, do you have 30 minutes to grab coffee? I'll probably say, no, I'm busy, I have other stuff. But it's like, you want to send me a DocuSign about why you're awesome? Done. Like that's easy. Um, so I think as you go down this process, I'm not going to lie to you and say no one is an easy thing to do. It takes work, but this like people, everyone in this room wants you to get it. And there's a lot of things that work out as well if you kind of go for it.
You said everybody in this room wants you to get it. The reason that whole feeling is important because during this, I work in news, so I kind of have to be plugged in.
You also work at Fox.
My day job is a Fox. So even though I work in sports, I'm plugged in with all things right of center commentary and also left of center commentary. And when that was unfolding in December, just to give you guys a backstory, there was a lot of discourse when Trump's AI czar, David Sachs, appointed Sriram Krishnan, who's a client of mine, to work in the all things AI. And at a podcast episode, which my guys produced, funnily enough, he said something about the fact that US should do better about removing green card caps, which basically means every country gets the set number of green cards agnostic of how many people are applying and or what the talent level of people, like it doesn't take skill into account is the point. And he talked about that, which got blown up into basically he wants to bring in anyone and everyone, and then H1B got brought into question. Can you tell me a little bit more about like first of all, like I know you were tweeting during that time. What was going through your head?
Dude, it was the weirdest few times. Though unrelated, I didn't even know the Sriram thing was happening. I tweeted, I was like, yeah, America would be great if we had more immigrants. Here are some things we can do. But apparently it was a very, very hot button topic in a lot of extremist right wing groups.
Yeah.
And I was traveling. I was in South America with my parents. I wasn't even looking. And the next time I looked, there's like 250 comments, everything from like, go home, to people like someone's like, don't make me bring out my gun. People were taking this stuff really, really seriously.
Yeah.
On my end, it didn't bother me much.
Yeah.
But I had to stop my mom from reading it. She would like read it and cry, and I was like, it's not that deep. But for whatever reason, I personally think part of that was manufactured sentiment. Like if you look at the comments, a lot of it was fake accounts, but it definitely was also something underlying about a big part of the right wing platform was, hey, America's for Americans, which is at odds with how a lot of people in Silicon Valley and entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
where we want to bring the smartest people. So it was a very interesting few days.
Yeah.
Um, it didn't bother me that much,
Yeah.
but shit got gnarly.
It got gnarly, and to give people more context, I was in DC during inauguration, and I'm pretty in touch with how the base of right and also the base of left thinks. Something which I realized that because of this election cycle, there are two core bases in the right. One of which is the nativist, like we call them. I don't know if you guys know who Steve Bannon is, like that way of thinking. And then the other side is all things which actually, in my opinion, allowed Trump to win this election, which is the Elon Musk, the techno right. I like to call them the techno bohemist kind of people who are not really like conservative, but they align with what Trump was saying cosmetically. And they were also pissed with all thing left. The only overlap they have is that they agree on free speech and being anti-woke. They actually disagree on a lot about like what America is, who America should be for, like what the working class should enjoy in the States. So that's a fascinating fight which will keep on happen. But what you guys should focus on is not that. Because as it turns out, the money is with people on the techno right, because they know how like all things AI raised a shit ton of money, like literally today. And the conversation would keep pushing skilled labor into the discussion in a positive way. So even though if you go on Twitter, the vibe check is off. So, but at the same time, the money is basically pushing skilled immigration.
Yeah, I also personally think a lot of that is not representative of everyone. Like
No, no, totally.
Twitter is a bubble, and I was actually chatting with one of these white supremacists that messaged me. He was like, I actually like your stuff, so I'm telling you what's going on, but there's always groups where we're being told to like attack these posts. So a lot of this is coordinated. I did end my sort of, I was like, I'm not going to talk about this anymore, but the last thing I said, and I thought about this a lot, and I still stand by it. A lot of people don't agree with me. I still think while America is and can be very racist,
Yeah,
it's probably still the least racist country in the world.
totally.
And, so that is still sort of my overarching sentiment towards it.
Yeah, 100% true. And secondarily, something which I've realized, one of the best things which happened to me when I moved here was I was assigned to make documentaries in Texas, Missouri, Wisconsin, Michigan, Idaho. Point being, I traveled a lot. I met a lot of people. Some of them, very few people who were kind of like, you look like this, where are you from, whatever, all that stuff. The biggest thing I realized that those people have zero agency. They have no agency over your life in general and the stuff which you want to build. You can go out of your way and become sad and be pissed about that they exist, or you can just say it doesn't really matter and they have no agency over my life. That's my approach. I don't go on the streets to basically whatever, but the point being, they have no agency. And like Ankur said, I've been to soccer games all over Europe. Trust me, there are way more racist people than in this country. Shifting gears a little bit, how do you think about this next chapter of your life, building all things carry? And why did you? It's super ironic for someone who forgot to pay his taxes when he was 17 and made a shit ton of money to now build a platform for all things taxes. Talk to me why you started on that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just turned 31 when I sold my company. I was like, I never want to run a startup again. Spent 18 months living my version of an eat, pray, love trip around the world. Uh, After that, I was still about to be 33, and I was like, too young to do this shit. Like, I kind of I miss my sport, and for whatever fucked up reason, my sport is building businesses and starting companies, and I miss it. I miss like having a team of people to work with, going to the office every day, like trying to build a mission that's bigger than us. So I wanted to start a startup. The reason I decided to pick this specific company is while selling my last business, I was able to like spend money right before to hire expensive lawyers and accountants, and like they taught me how to structure the deal. And in the process, we saved so much money, and I would have not done that had I not been able to hire these lawyers and accountants and realize that the tax code is incredibly complicated. There's 150,000 words added every year. Um, there's no easy way to navigate that, especially as a business owner, which could be a freelancer, someone self-employed, where there's so many opportunities in the code, but how do we actually build something that helps you take advantage of all of that?
you have built two really successful companies at this time, and whether you like
Jury's still out in the second.
it's gonna be big. Point being, you've had to involve yourselves in a lot of hiring, and that made you, I'm guessing, a really good judge of what kind of applicants are suitable for companies which you are building. And I'm pretty sure you came across a lot of immigrant founders. As someone who has been on both sides of the employee table, what kind of differences have you seen regarding how immigrant founders have or immigrant employees have stood out?
I love hiring immigrant employees. In general, I just, again, think there's alpha in hiring immigrants because if not many small startups are willing to sponsor visas, and like paying for a visa is cheaper than paying for a recruiter. And you're typically going to get someone who's going to, on average, work hard, stay longer, uh, and you're kind of making America better in the process. So, big fan of doing that. But in terms of how immigrant founders hire, I'm not feel like it's hard to paint a brush
Yeah, yeah, it's a
on
problem.
all
Yeah,
sort
yeah.
of. But I know for me, when I'm hiring, what I look for is I don't care much for pedigree. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care where you worked. Historically, that's sometimes been a negative. Like we find someone from the sexy company and then realize they did nothing over there. They're not why the company succeeds. So what we look for is how much does this person want to work at a startup? Like startups can be really fun, but they can also suck. So if someone wants a comfortable big tech job,
Yeah.
they're probably not the right fit for us. Along with, yeah, like how hungry is this person? And typically what I judge for that is, have they produced a body of work outside of their full-time job? It can be like a blog, it can be like a social media account. It doesn't have to be
Yeah.
something fancy. It can be a side project. But what is that body of work? And then wherever possible, like to see if there's any way of like working together for a short period of time. Because what I've found is no matter how well you interview, you'll get it wrong 1 out of 4 times,
Yeah.
which is pretty high. So if you can kind of work with someone, that helps quite a bit.
I was listening to one of your Teachable employees where was a guest on some podcast, and I love how he described working at All Things Teachable and kind of the judge of character you wanted to look for. I think the biggest thing I took away from it is that all things today's economy, especially in tech and media, and push back if you disagree, you need to be an inch deep and a mile wide. It's good to be a generalist, which was kind of sort of like looked down upon when I was coming up. How do you, as of now, decide that, okay, these are the kind of people who I want to keep in the core of my team? And how do you decide on who gets through the revolving door? I know it's a hard,
Of course. And
yeah,
I will caveat with a lot of this is like what I look for. And a lot of this comes down to who I am as a person. So a different type of person may have a different sort of thing. But for me, speed is incredibly important. Like I think as a startup, speed is one of your only competitive advantages. So if you kind of thrash around and only sometimes go in a good direction, that's still good for me. Then finding the person that will take time to do things perfectly, which is a very different culture. Some cultures appreciate that. Other than that, someone who doesn't need to be told what to do, like,
yeah,
you kind of are truly a self-starter, and someone who's comfortable with just complete and utter uncertainty. Like startups are so hard that if sometimes there's a lot of people, especially like let's say you are in med school, law school, like you always have the next step in your life clearly laid out. Startups have the opposite of that. There's never a fucking next step. So finding people comfortable with that is another big.
last question for you. What do you think, like if you had a magic brush, what do you think US's approach should be towards all thing skilled immigration? And what do you think is stopping them from doing that?
So the way I look at it is like, I don't know, pick a sport. Let's say this is like a soccer game or whatever. US is up like 6-0. Like you have a chance to like fully like, finish the game for any other country. You don't want to blow the lead at this point is sort of the way I think about it. America has such a strong head start, but people have realized as work becomes remote, as you can kind of build from anywhere, it becomes a war for talent. Countries realize that we're not that far away. We already have versions of this in Dubai and stuff where you're competing for talent, the way a sports team competes for athletes.
Yeah.
The US is so far ahead. All we have to do is kind of make it easier and easier for people to start businesses, for people who raise money to be able to have visas. And the other thing I think makes a lot of difference is make it easier for students to start companies, make it easier for spouses of smart people to do things. You do some of these basics, we're already so far ahead that it's really just protecting the sort of lead, but we have a chance to create so much separation between us and everyone else.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much. After we wrap up, if you have questions regarding all things lawyers and immigration, Sampei is the guy. Sampei, can you raise your hand one more time? He's the founder of Ellis. If you have questions regarding all things Ankur and his career, Ankur is the guy. If you want to be involved, this was our 6th event, and this we are finishing up on 1 year. I'm trying to grow it as much as possible. So if you want to be involved in all things content, logistics, execution, please talk to me. And thank you for coming, guys.